morning. As I said before, I am not Jeff. How's Jeff doing, Julie? Is doing fine? Okay, so Julie said Jeff made it there yesterday just fine. So I almost thought about sending Jeff a picture of me this morning with my communion, because Jeff gives me a hard time about all sorts of things. One of them happens to be is about, I don't know, I'm probably being gracious to myself 50% of the time. I come in, do the announcements, and then I realize I don't have my communion. So I have to sneak back in the back. So if you see me sneaking, that's probably why. And he sits back there and he just shakes his head at me. So sometimes he'll remind me. He'll say, do you have your communion? I'll be like, I'll go get it. So I almost sent a picture because I had it. I was going to send him a picture of me smiling with my communion. As you know, Jeff's been going through some of the different characters of the Bible, and he's picked the ones that he loved, and you can tell it because of the way he talks about them. I think he's taught on them a lot. He knows them, and we have some great conversations. One of the things that I've been teaching on Wednesday nights with the teens is we've been doing different characters of the Bible too, but we focused on women of the Bible. So I was trying to think, I should do something similar along the lines of what Jeff's doing. I'll pick a person, and I ended up doing this a few weeks ago, so I said, let's talk about Ruth. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Ruth. Many of you probably know the story, but I kind of want to make sure that we all have the same baseline, so I'm going to talk through it a little bit. I know you cannot read that. I hope that when I put it up there that maybe there'll be some of it you could see. Probably all you can see is the word Ruth, so at least that got you to the right book. So that is what we're studying about today, but I'm going to kind of walk through the different chapters, what things are touched on. And as you can see, there's 4 numbers up there, 1, 2, 3, 4. Ruth is actually a very small book. It was easy for us on Wednesday night. We read all the way through it in one sitting, and we're able to talk about it. So it was a great class that we had. So if you remember the book of Ruth, it occurs in the time period of the Judges. So if you remember the time period of the Judges for the Israel, it's not such a great time. You read a few chapters in Judges, and then it says, and the people did as what they thought was right within their own heart. And then things would just kind of spiral down, and God would raise up another judge to kind of lead them or be a military leader, and then once again things would spiral down, and then it was just kind of this constant pattern. So I think like last week we talked about Gideon. Next week I think Jeff will probably do Samson, which is kind of the end of that spiraling. He's probably one of, as Jeff said, I think it's Jeff's belief too that Samson's just not a good guy. So you'll hear that next week. But I think you look in Judges, and here's a story that happened in the time of Judges with some good people. I mean, there's some really good characters here, and things and what they do and how they behave in alignment with God's guidance, right? The law that they've been given, the guidance they've been given. You can see these people behaving in a way and in a character that aligns with God's character, right? So the story starts out, chapter 1, there's a famine in Bethlehem. You have Naomi, who is kind of the matriarch of this story. She has a husband, and then she has 2 daughters. They move to Moab because of the famine. In Moab, the 2 daughters find husbands. And I'm sorry, I'm messing that up. The 2 sons find wives that are in Moab. So Ruth and Orpah, who was the other wife, ended up being from Moab. And then you start to have, at the very beginning, you have this tragedy that occurs. So the father dies, the sons die, so all that's left is Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah in a foreign land. Okay, so they're not in Israel anymore. They're foreigners. They're far away. They've had all this tragedy occur, right? And then, they have to make a decision. Naomi decides, I'm going to go back to Israel. And she tells her 2 daughter-in-law, she says, you stay here. Right? And Orpah decides, yes, I'm going to stay here. As Naomi tells them, there is the guidance that God has given them that, if a son dies or your husband dies, the brother is supposed to take you up, supposed to marry you and have children with you so that your family line can continue. Naomi says, I have no other children. There's not anything good for you in Israel. This is your land. You stay here. Right? So Orpah stays, but Ruth decides to stay with Naomi. right? Even though now Ruth is going to be the foreigner. She's going somewhere. She probably has family in Moab. She knows that area wherever she's at. And now she's going to stick with Naomi, and she's going to travel back with her. And she says kind of that famous phrase that is almost kind of the anthem of this book: where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God is going to be my God. Right? That is what Ruth says to Naomi. So Naomi, of course, she's had all this tragedy occur. She says at one point, my name is no longer Naomi, which I understand I think means sweet, but my name is Mara, which is bitter. Right? She's had all this happen to her. So they go back to Israel. They have a problem, right? They need food. They don't have anyone to provide for them. Naomi tells Ruth, go glean in the fields to see if you can get food, if you can get barley. The Israelites were supposed to be following this rule that as they harvest the fields, if there's things that fall on the ground, you leave it there so that others that are in poverty or in need or in foreigners can come along and pick that up. So it's kind of a way of the Israelites providing for those that are in need. And Naomi tells Ruth to go and do this. And you got to imagine, there's probably not all farmers or harvesters that did that. It's probably just like today, right? There's some people said, no, get it all, right? This is my field, this is my stuff. But we find that this field that she goes to, they're following that practice. And she's able to get something to eat. And that's where Ruth meets the person who owns this field, which is Boaz. So now we kind of have our three major characters, right? Ruth, Naomi, and Boaz. So Boaz sees Ruth, shows favor to Ruth, allows her to glean more easily in the field, provides her with protection, tells her people that are taking care of that field to watch out for her. He's obeying that command, in the Torah, to show kindness to the foreigner, to the oppressed, and he prays that God will reward her for her boldness. So Ruth goes back, tells Naomi what has happened, right? So Naomi realizes Boaz's potential as their kinsman redeemer. So as they look at their relatives, their list of relatives, Boaz is a distant relative to them and could be the person that redeems the family, right? He's that kinsman redeemer. So Naomi gets very excited about the potential for this. As we go into chapter 3, Naomi puts together a plan with Ruth for her to go and present herself to Boaz at the threshing floor. Ruth does that. She follows Naomi's advice. And Boaz takes her under his wing as a kinsman redeemer. And Boaz makes a promise of loyalty to Ruth and to Naomi. But he does note that there's a hitch here. There's another person that's a little bit closer and relative to Naomi. So he's not the closest. So he has to sort that out if he wants this to happen. So, of course, Ruth returns to Naomi, tells her of the good news of Boaz, and they marvel at these events that have occurred. As we go into chapter 4, Boaz goes to the city gate to take care of this kind of kinsman redeemer problem that he has. He goes there, he talks to them, he says, there's a closer kinsman redeemer than me. And there's a lot of different interpretations of trying to understand exactly what is going on here. And you see different people writing about what might have been occurring. Some people think that, in this case, he goes to the Redeemer and he says, there's this land. You can redeem this land. You can get this land if you want it. But with that comes Naomi. You have to take care of her. And then also, there's a daughter-in-law, Ruth. Some believe that what he was suggesting was that you can have the land, but I'm going to marry Ruth. Some people think that's how that should be interpreted. And that then the person, the kinsman redeemer says, I'm not interested in the land. Some people think it's because if he married Ruth and they had a male child, that they would then have the land, that they would then get the land. So there's different ideas of why the redeemer maybe said, I'm not interested. But anyways, the redeemer said, I'm not interested, and it falls to Boaz, right? So Boaz marries Ruth. They're blessed by the townspeople. Ruth and Boaz have a son named Obed, who becomes trying to think of the word for it. The grandfather of King David, right? So we're actually at the end of the story, you find out this is about the lineage of King David, right? And then we end up with Naomi and Ruth all kind of in a moment of joy of what has happened in this whole story. So, I mean, I like when I look through some of these stories and people point out how there's kind of this symmetry sometimes to the stories that are told that I kind of miss. So I try to throw this up there. On the left-hand side, you see the story starts out in death and tragedy, right? They're in a foreign land. They seem to have lost everything. And then you look in the far right corner, bottom right corner, the story ends with joy and blessing, right, and birth. After the death and tragedy that occurs, you have that instance where Ruth talks about her loyalty that she's going to have for Naomi. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to be with you. Same thing happens with Boaz towards the end of the story. He has this loyalty to Ruth and to Naomi. And in the story, you see Boaz even say, like, he marvels at Ruth and at her character, that she is willing to show so much loyalty to Naomi. So he can kind of see through, this isn't, other people probably see this as a foreigner, this is a non-Israelite, but he sees the character of who she is. And that's what he was looking for, this type of person. And then as you look in chapters 2 and 3, both of those start out, and then in the middle, and then at the end, kind of have similar flow there as well. At the beginning of both of those chapters, Ruth and Naomi are making some sort of plan. And one, in chapter 2, they're talking about we need to find out a way to get food. And they have this plan for Ruth to go out and in the fields. And then in the beginning of chapter 3, they're talking about a plan of how to approach Boaz, right? So there's this parallel between those two chapters of making a plan. And then in the middle, there's kind of this interaction between Ruth and Boaz. And then at the end of the chapter, there's rejoicing, right? The plan, things are working out, okay? So I wanted to just kind of lay that baseline just to make sure many of you know this story. I know I left some things out, even though it's a short story. There's other things that are going on here. I even had Phyllis told me this morning, she said, this is one of my favorite stories. I love Ruth, right? So for those of you who have known the story of Ruth, maybe have heard the classes on it before, you studied it, what is it about Ruth that you remember? What is it that you enjoyed, or what do you pull out of this story? What does this story teach you? Just to kind of open it up, or what do you like about it? Yeah. It's kind of amazing, right? I think about if I was put in that situation, I don't know. I'd like to think I would do that, but I don't know that I would. You're thinking about your future, your family, you having kids, you're in an area that you know, and to kind of maybe give everything up because of your love and your loyalty for this person, right? It's kind of amazing what she does. It's Julie. Right. And there's so much we don't know, but like the fact that she made that statement that your God's going to be my God, she knew something, right? She probably knew a lot. Like you said, she watched them, she was with them. There's something that they taught her about God that made her say, I'm going with you, right? Also, they were amazing examples for her. What else? What do you like about the story of Ruth? There's some other thoughts. Yeah. Yeah. That's also shows something about him, right? So I said, like in the time of Judges, we think about all the things that are going wrong, and you've got this character of Naomi and Ruth, and then you've got Boaz, who's watching out for her, taking care of her, comes up with a plan. Yeah, it's showing love for her and loyalty. Yeah, said, I forget the phrase. I don't know if you were skimming. I think it was a mighty man, or there's a phrase that was used to describe him in the book of Ruth. Yeah, absolutely. Hmm. That's right too. Yeah, good point. Right, right. Had to probably be foreign to her, some of these things that Naomi was telling her. And yeah, you're right. She trusted her. She listened to her mother-in-law. Yeah. Other thoughts? What do you like about the story of Ruth? Andy. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that. A highly concentrated story of love, right? Uh, just in 4 chapters, we get so much. I mean, you can tell the story's been well told, probably verbally, and then when it was written down, it's just hitting all the great points about this story. Very succinctly communicated from story by these storytellers, and then we get to have that today in the book of Ruth. Yeah, I'm not sure I have a great answer for that, too. I've tried to look in commentaries to see a good explanation for that. I don't know if others have heard one, but yeah, that's so. When she goes to him at the threshing floor, it's actually at night, and she sleeps at his feet. So it seems very odd, right? We're like, why? So I'm assuming there is something in society. Oh, Sue, yes. Oh, okay. Yes. Reflection. Okay. Right. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Thank you, Sue. So, okay. Thank you. If you're a woman today, maybe we've come a long ways. I don't know. But my wife would not want to lay at my feet at any point. It's nothing good. You're right, yeah. Thank you. What other things or maybe questions come up that we can talk about? Any other thoughts? Yeah, Jim. Mm-hmm. Right. The way I took that was not, necessarily, maybe literally, but like that she had lost her son, right? She had lost her lineage, the future of her family, but then through the son, it had been restored. So this kind of, in a way, became her son. That's the way I saw that. Any other thoughts or understood that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because some of that, that rule of, if your brother dies and the other brother's supposed to take the wife, that's continuing that family name so that name would not be blotted out, right? So you have Boaz doing that in this situation, continuing that family name. I think we've kind of talked about these. I tried to pull together a few things. I think there's typos in here. So one of the things I liked, some of the commentaries said I hadn't really thought about before, was talking about how this provides a picture of David's lineage and kind of the two parts of that lineage, how there's poor and there's rich. So you had, Naomi and those coming from a foreign land, and you had rich, so you had Boaz, who had this, he was a farmer. How there was background in David's roots about, Israelite and Moabite, landless, people that had land, the lost, and someone that was redeemed, and also how the outcome was influenced by man, but you still see God in there too. So you don't see God show up a lot in this story, specifically stated. Of course, you have Ruth saying, where you go, I'll go. Your God will be my God. But you don't necessarily hear like lots of statements about God doing. But you certainly feel it through the story, right? All of these things that are coming out, you see and expect this influence of God in the story. We're reading the book of Esther right now, another one where you'd say, you don't see, the God doesn't explicitly come out there all the time, but you can just see the workings that are going on in this story to save the Israelites in the story of Esther. So you see, God working here in the story. You also see, and we've talked a lot about this, gives an example of hesed kindness. So hesed is a word that's used there. It's used throughout the Old Testament. Not easy necessarily to translate, at least for me to understand. They said it's kind of like loyal love. So it's kind of like hesed kindness is love, generosity, and enduring commitment all wrapped up into one word. So when they talk about the kindness that's being shown here, the love that's being shown here, it's all those things, a promise, keeping loyalty, motivated by deep personal care. So you see this occurring with Ruth to Naomi, this hesed kindness, and you see this happening, like we said, from Boaz to Ruth. Like I said, Ruth 1:8, we see that kind of main statement in the book. So Ruth exceeds what's expected of her if she was an Israelite, even in the Torah. Her faithfulness leads to healing and to honor in this story, and she becomes kind of a persistent relationship in a time of crisis. Naomi is in a time of crisis, but Ruth decides to stay with her. So we see this kind of confidence in God's work being able to fill the empty, protect the vulnerable, and joy kind of breaking into the world. So where we see sadness and joy and tragedy, through this story we see at the end this joy and this birth that happens from that. So kind of this example, and you get that character of what God's like, right? Hesed kindness that he has for us. There's nothing that I do that earns anything. It's because of his promise that he's made for me, or to me, right? He loves me. He has that kindness for all of us because of who he is, right? And you also see this this is who Ruth is. This is Ruth's character. For for Naomi, and then you see Boaz's character, right? Because of who he is and his character that he does these things. Okay? So I think it's another great example of that concentrated love, that kindness that we also see from God. Any other thoughts before I stop talking? Okay. Well, thank you all for listening. Wonderful, wonderful book, wonderful story. If you have time this week, it's 4 chapters. Read it. It's a quick read. Thank you all.